There we go. Hello. Got to turn on my mic. Welcome, everybody, to another episode where we're going to be continuing painting up this rendition of the real Ghostbusters villain, the Boogeyman. We're quite far along, as you can see. And last time we spent a good amount of the stream doing some lighting. We did a directional light and we finalized some colors. We brought in some textures. And so I'm feeling like we're getting a really good visual on where this is headed now. And so we start to get into some additional material definition, some details, possibly some extra lights, effects. We have to see what we're going to do about that hair. We wanted to try and have the hair be a window into another dimension. So I'm thinking of maybe pulling in some astrophotography, um, some stars, nebulas, things like that. We'll play with that stuff as well. So I'm excited to jump back into this. So yeah, I hope you're doing something creative and fun on your end. Remember to save often, and let's get going here. All right. Now we've got a little bit of cleanup we can do at some point. We have a few kind of nasty edges, but a lot of that stuff I tend to leave for when we've merged everything together. So it's because it's really easy to do it at that point. What I'd rather do at this moment is probably start to think about some material definition and maybe a little bit more texture work. So I want to get into an additive layer here where we're going to maybe add some highlights. We're going to be very restrained about that. And what we could even consider doing is, let's see, we'll play with this and see what we can get out of it. Sometimes I like to put these broad highlights or the diffused reflections underneath my shadows just so that way I can be really sort of broad and I'm not worried about them stomping on the shadow work, but I don't know. We'll see how this works. Might be able to kind of tackle it all in one layer here. I'm kind of playing with a blending mode thing here. I'm trying to do some of these highlights on an overlay layer. See how I'm liking that situation. So you can see how that fills in some of those upper half tones there and allows us to get just a bit more dimensionality out of these shapes. But I'm also being careful not to make everything feel like it's shiny or plastic. We don't want to have that. I mean, certain materials do warrant feeling that way, but nothing we're touching at the moment here. Yeah, so I think overlay is giving me a good a richness there. It's sort of pulling all of the color, the subtle color stuff we have in that textured flat layer underneath. It's kind of pulling it out and forward. And I like having some of that stuff come forward a little bit more. I think we're going to stick with this. And I think the fur overall here just probably needs some more texture. And I definitely don't want to have this fur feel shiny. So I'm going to be careful about how I approach these highlights on this area here. And just enough to kind of help us read the shapes and make the volumes feel complete. So we turn that on and off. Hopefully you'll kind of see how it's very, very subtle, right? But this helps us feel that cylindrical nature there. There's a few rough edges from our key shadows still in here. I think is this layer. Oh, that's our ambience. This layer. There we go. And I find that this is pretty common for me is that I'll usually miss a thing or two on the shadow pass in terms of like blending or yeah, just catching the nuance of an edge. So as I continue to work, I will have to bounce back to that layer and make little modifications here and there. And there and here, as Bob Ross would say. Okay, how is that? How's that feeling? Yeah, okay, cool. I wonder if we could maybe bump up the noggin here a little bit. Okay, cool. And then okay, maybe we get a little bit of highlight on that brow, a little bit on the nose and the nostril. When you're doing this kind of subtle highlight work, it is good to check it with the layer on and off because you sort of almost forget how it felt without them, right? It's like if you're doing it right, you kind of just blends right in, right? It feels like it just belongs. It doesn't stand out awkwardly, and so turning the layer off can help you kind of better judge, I guess, if what you're doing is too much, too little, how much it might be affecting things. And you can kind of look at where the shadows hit, and you can think about how that is a little hint as to that angle of light. And then just beyond that, shadows where you can start to think about, okay, would we maybe start to see some shiny reflectivity stuff going on? So the shadows are nice because they're giving you all kinds of helpful clues about what's going on. They can help inform other passes you're doing. Here I'm kind of finessing the directional shadows a bit. In fact, I may just pull that one down a little bit. I feel like that's yeah, I think that's just a little strong. I'm going to pull back on that and bring a little more ambient shadow into this transition section here. Now what happened here? I'm kind of curious what exactly is going on because that's a pretty big mist area there, and I think I may just want to correct that in the layers here. If I go to the hair region and then we go inverse of that, I think I can just pull this shadow out to fill it in. Yeah, let's do that. It was a little too distracting. Like when the edge is that off, that's like I can't pay attention to anything else. So we got it handled. We're good. Now we're on to back on to the highlights. Let's go back to that. And I wanted to kind of look at this area here in the mouth. Just thinking about, maybe a little bit of shine off that lip area. You kind of have like a more of like a wet sort of look going on a lot of times there. And then probably hit the tongue as well. Maybe we'll go a little broader with that. Get a couple little shiny spots on the teeth here. Maybe it even hits these on the top line there. Now, metallic objects are going to want a different layer so that they can have a different blending mode. So we'll hold off on like the button highlights. We'll get those in later. Something you have to be cautious about with using overlay is that it does pull those colors forward and it can start to give things when pushed too far it can kind of oversaturate the image and there can be more of like a cartoony sort of feel to it. um so just yeah, something to kind of pay attention to there. There's a subtlety we're living in with this pass that I don't have any worries about that, but if you're doing something where you need a lot of heavy highlights on saturated tones, you may and it wants to feel realistic, you may be a little careful about doing something like overlay. There's nothing wrong with just doing a normal layer and then using a adjustment layer to maybe colorize it a little bit or, tune it up a bit. I think our shadow pass feels a little strange right there. I'm going to tweak that. Whoops, not like that. There we go. Trying to kind of focus the light a little bit more up here. So we're adding just a bit more light decay to some of those areas. And I think there needs to be a little bit more roundness to the belly there. I'd like to get we're kind of darting around right now, but I think that's kind of natural for me in these later stages as I start to just kind of react to things that I want to tweak and play with. On the fur, I was thinking maybe it wants a little bit more. Well, there's that nice feature that Photoshop likes to have of filling my screen with the canvas. Thanks, Photoshop. Okay, do we get there? Yeah, I think we're. Let's see. Does that look? That looks all right. Yeah. So I wanted to play with perhaps a little bit more fur on the legs here, or a little more texture. And let's see. Do I have anything? I think I may have some brushes that could be fun to play with here. Um. Yeah. Let's see. Some like streaks. This is like kind of fine grained texture, but I think it sort of helps, right? Like it kind of helps us feel that surface a little bit better. I mean, we could even do something like, is it that maybe there's like some weird spots on the fur? That could be kind of fun. Almost get into like a kind of, it gives me kind of like hyena vibes or something, which is interesting. Kind of like that. You guys remember, I think it was in the last stream, I was putting textures on the code and it defaulted to like an eel skin. That was pretty wild. This pattern is kind of giving me memories of that look. That's kind of cool and interesting. I wonder, is that maybe that's just maybe that's too much? Um, let's kind of want to maybe pull back on it a little bit down here. It's a little more kind of up high like that. Yeah, yeah, that looks better. Rocking my spin drift pineapple again. Hashtag not sponsored. All right. Yeah, let's go back to the highlights. There's definitely some other areas to do that with. We can probably do a little boost on the tail here. And let's see, is it worth doing? I mean, we've got this in shadow, but sometimes it can just still help the form to push that a little bit. I want to be very careful about it here, though, because we're kind of being a little bit unrealistic about some of that. It's stylization for the sake of readability, which, yeah, again, something to very carefully wield as an artist is that stylization wand. Now, what happens here on this feather? Like, is it that I almost want to just go through with something hard edge like this? And then maybe like use a mask to selectively show this highlight. I mean, it's not too bad even like that, but let's mask that, and then we'll use round brush here. And I think I want to pull it. What is going on? Why is this not working? There we go. I want to kind of pull it away from this half here. Get a little more on that side. And then I think we'll leave this stuff sort of unhighlighted back here. I kind of want that to be just a kind of a graphic element in shadow. We do want to bring some highlights to the little eyeball guys. Now, imagine these guys have kind of a gross, slightly slimy kind of skin going on. So I feel like that warrants some of this highlight going on. And now, what about these teeth here? Probably just, yeah, we could do something subtle like that. That seems to be good. Definitely need to clean up the shadows a bit on this guy. Got a little sloppy. See if we can fix that up. Back to highlights. We'll do I'm thinking about whether I want to approach this with layers or if I just want to do it in the overpaint, the eyeball details. There's a part of me that just wants to do it in the overpaint, but I don't know, we'll see. Okay. Now I get kind of a diffused highlight here first to get some roundness. Then let's bring in a specular highlight here. Get some of that wetness going on. I had to realize you guys on stream probably can't see it quite as well as I can because I'm pretty zoomed out when I'm doing some of this stuff. So apologies there. Um, but I will say, when you guys are working, you might be surprised at what you can accomplish with the piece further away from you. There is, I think, a general tendency for people to want to zoom way in to help them with precision and whatnot, but that can sometimes really mess you up, right? Because you don't really have a sense of what the impact is to the total piece when you're that close to it. So I guess the takeaway there is try things further away from the piece than you think would work. You might be surprised. Huh. It's like, why is that not having any effect? That's because I'm painting on the shadow layer. Whoopsies. I was fixing shadows over here. That's why. Okay, let's back to highlight layer. One of the downfalls of working in a layered process, you have to remember what layer you're on. And then, of course, the trick of squinting your eyes, right, blurring your vision a little bit, can really help you dial in some nice realistic subtlety. And painting these organics is really fun, I'll tell you. I'm sure you guys, if you guys are artists out there watching, you'll recognize the fun of painting creepy creatures and being able to just be very fun with the sculptural shapes and the way things fuse together. I think there's a similar creative freedom when you're designing like made up mechanical devices or robots and things as well. Playing with proportions and forms, the way that they stack together, and it really is a stimulating experience. I think compared to like I'm going to look at a photo of some fruit on a table and paint the photo of the fruit. I mean, there's a lot to learn there, but yeah, it doesn't uh doesn't test the same skills, right? Totally different skills, overlapping in many ways, but certainly unique as well. Where is that coming from? That is just a weird shadow going on there. Can we get rid of that, please? Where is that? Is that that might be a hole in the flats. Is that really a hole in the flats? Let's find out. First, I have to find the skin layer. There's the skin layer, and indeed it was a hole in the skin layer. And there's actually a little bit of hole work we have to clean up here. Kind of cool seeing it by itself, right? You get some of that interesting little color variation going on that we added with the textures. Some pinks and some blues. And we could push this more. Remember, though, that what we're looking at here isn't the only skin layer. There's all of these layers as well that add variance. But yeah, I mean, you could come in here and you could certainly sample from some of what's going on here and push it further. We could grab our lab slider. We could go a little more blue with it. Throw in a few little patches here and there. Kind of push that variance. With this kind of stuff, this also is great for you to just go too far right away so you know what the limit is and zoom out to check. Like that was felt like a very strong hit of blue. And then when I zoom out, I think I don't know. I can kind of barely tell that it's there. So the other thing you can do is you could imply some weird veins, right? That's always kind of fun. We did that, I think, a little bit on the last Ghostbusters villain. When you've got really pale skin like this, there's a sort of a translucency going on, and you might see some vein stuff going on color wise. So that can be fun to play with. And just in general, no matter what sort of skin type you're working with, skin tends to be a complex material with a lot of variation and subtlety. So look at some references and don't miss out on that. That's like a great opportunity in a piece to add some life to it. Imagine if the skin was just like this like maybe this slight greenish gray here, flat, the whole thing, right? He would feel like a statue. He wouldn't feel alive. I mean, we could even bring it into some of the little eyeball guys. These guys have similar things going on. Now, actually, these guys, the skin layer it's a different layer. Um, but yeah, same sort of deal here. The I'm trying to figure out how I made that pupil. Is that its own layer? This is why naming stuff is really, really important. Okay, if I turn off our lighting and I click that, what do we get? Yeah, okay, it is on its own layer. I did not name it. So I'll call this eyeball buddy left, camera left, pupil. Turn our lighting back on. I say lighting, but our flats indicate some base level of lighting. So yeah, it's kind of a misnomer, but I think you guys get what I mean by that. Like our layers that are only dealing with lighting, those are the layers we're turning off. Cloud, it's going to be very diffused. I'm curious though if we do bring in just a very subtle, kind of diffused highlight there, just to sort of help that spherical volume read. I think that's safe, right? We can kind of just give it a little hit there. And then I think in the merged version, we'll definitely be dithering edges. I mean, it's all very hard edged right now and feels very cartoony. Okay. Highlights on this hand here. Okay, let's see. When you're adding these, it's also helpful to think about where the skin is pulled tighter. And that's a place where it is more likely to have a highlight. So on a knuckle, on the base knuckle, or any of the the finger knuckles, those all can be potentially places to have that. We're just trying to help us feel the cylindrical volume of the arm here. We can maybe bring a little highlight along that section, but I'm going to be pretty reserved about it. See, it's pretty subtle, but yeah, these highlights here though can be really, really nice to add. So let's do a few metallic highlights. We know we need some because of these earrings and whatnot. So we'll do a new layer on color dodge. That's my favorite for raw metal. Raw metal, dude. And then we'll switch this. When you do, just remember, this is like, I think I've mentioned this before. You want to turn off this transparency shapes layer checkbox on certain blending modes because it won't really look correct. And now I also have some brushes that are kind of textury that I like to use for adding a bit of pizzazz to my highlights. You can see here it has just a little bit of noise to it that gives it just a bit more character than if it was just a flat brush. And in fact, when we add rim lighting later, I was sort of looking at our previous Ghostbusters image, and I was thinking, the rim light I think was cool, but it maybe felt a little bit soft. And I'm curious how it might look if we were to give it a little bit more texture. So we'll play with that as well. You see, there's just a little bit of crunchiness to that I think is nice. And the thing about this too is, we really haven't done any unique like textural overlays. We've done patterns. We've certainly painted some texture work in, but we haven't like found anything particularly unique or weird to lay in, like, I don't know, some weird like rips and tears. We could just paint that in if we wanted to as well. Sometimes that organic texture and damage work is nicely aided by an initial overlay, photo overlay, just to give you some ideas to help you visualize the fidelity that might be needed to get that to read well. And then you go in and you tweak it, paint over it, right? So I think we may play with that as well. I'm looking at these teeth over here and they just feel really bright. I think I'm gonna pop those into shadow. I think it feels a little weird. Yeah, I think we want to just cut that shadow a little bit in more. And then yeah, maybe this tooth here is emerging and catching a little bit of light. I think that's fine. I mean, based on the angle of the light, I guess there could be a chance that maybe this nose end would get a little bit of shadow as well. But I think we'd want to be really careful about how much we dither that because I want it to be a very rounded form. So let's do something like that. Is it possible that we get a little bit more on this area? Yeah. I mean, with certain looks and styles, the whole piece could literally just be a very robust shadow pass, right? Like you could have your process be that and get some awesome results, which is just a subtractive process, right? If you think about it, it should be very familiar to anybody who's ever drawn on paper before, right? You're taking a bright piece of paper and you're applying dark things to the surface to remove light. That's a subtractive process. Some ambience that I don't really care for right in that pocket. Whoa. Okay. Let's do a little form check here, see how our forms are reading. Sorry, flashbang, everybody. Apologies. I mean, this is how we can really assess how is our form work doing. Yeah, I think that's working pretty good. Look at our values here. See our values. I think are reading pretty good. I wonder if we should. Oh, you know what I need to do? I need to put in some highlights on the eyeballs on this guy. Right? We totally forgot about that. We did that big highlight, and we didn't get in here and do our eyeballs. So we'll do a diffused highlight, and we'll do a specular highlight. Maybe we'll hit that a little harder. I mean, these are eyeballs, so can feel quite slimy. Kind of want to bring in just a really quick texture for that hair, just so we can start to envision that portal in the hair, that sort of space idea. So I've got an image of some stars here. This is like one of those, royalty free space photos. And I'm going to pop that onto the hair. So we got to first find it. Layer hair. Here it is. Flip that to the hair. All right. All right. Interesting vibes. Interesting vibes. What if we scale this? What if we scale it down? What if we scale it up? I want to play with the idea of how loud are the stars. So you think that's too big, right? Well, maybe it's not too big. Maybe it's just that there's too many. And that I think well, I think we maybe need to add another image of maybe like a nebula or something that might make it more obvious what we're dealing with here. But that's interesting, right? What I don't want it to read as is like glitter, right? Like we don't want it to read like he's just got bedazzled hair. I mean, maybe there's a character where that'd be perfect, but I don't think we want that for this guy. Let's pull down the levels on this, which will I think maybe help. What do I want to do here? I don't know why I keep looking over at my OBS for this. It's like my second monitor to view my image in a different way. I think if we go to low opacity on it, I think it doesn't read as stars. So something like that could be interesting. And then what I want to try here as well is if there's like maybe a little bit of additional flair to some of these. Like maybe that gives it more of like it starts to make it feel less like glitter, right? It feels a little bit more like stars in the sky or some kind of like, astral plane or something. I think if we have a few of those cues, I'm going to probably pull back on the stars in a few places. We'll lean into a few bigger stars here and there, and then we'll maybe try some kind of weird like nebula or yeah, like a dimensional rip or tear going on. It could be kind of cool. So yeah, I think that'll work. And then the edges of the hair, of course, can get a little bit of dithering as well. But why not play with another light? Let's try bringing in a rim light on the right side there, see if we like that or not. Add another layer. Let's have this be masked by the character's shape. I think we got a pretty good mask there, so let's pop that on. And now here's where I wanted to play with having the light be applied with a little bit of a crunchier brush with a little more texture, but I don't know what brush that is yet. So this is where we're going to have to play around a bit. So this brush has a little bit of crunch to it, but maybe not enough. What about this one? Okay. I mean, so if we combo that with a little bit of the smudge to create some hard and softness in that, that might be a good strategy. In fact, I don't know. Let's see. Can we lean into this light on his forehead here? We could also play with it being a color. Not sure how I feel about that, but let's just try it, see what happens. Obviously, the light will be in more places than just that, but I'm just kind of taking a moment here to see. Do a warm light. What if we bring down the brightness of our flats a little bit? Okay. We could play around with that light wrapping more. Get more of the head lit. And maybe that even that eyeball catches a little bit of that light. That's interesting. I'm typically a little bit, maybe too timid about how much I wrap a rim light. I mean, certainly seen artists plenty of times have success with a much more intrusive rim light. And so maybe it's time to just be a little bit bold and see how it goes. I mean, if we don't like it, we can always erase it. So, but one of the reasons I'm dimming the flats is because I want the frontal lighting to feel softer, right? Like if I'm going to lean into this idea of of a rim light that's strong and that is potentially wrapping a little further than a typical rim light, I don't want it to fight with the lighting from the front. You want to create dimensionality through different intensities of lighting, and if the front light is too hot, then it's gonna just the whole scene will feel really blown out, and everything will be pulling our attention equally, and we don't want that. So All right, so I like the texture of this brush, but this brush is certainly more difficult to control than other brushes I've got. Maybe it's worth the struggle. We'll see. And how much of this is getting hit by this light? I don't know. Like, is it just, oh, that's too much. I was going to say, I always talk about just going too far first and then pulling back, and maybe that's the strategy here. Also, this collar shape that will get caught. That's actually a nice opportunity to call that shape out. I was getting lost before. The brush, though, I will say, at least it operates pretty well when it's small. That's one of the main things you want to look for in a brush is that it can look pretty good at a wide range of sizes. If it only looks good when you've got the brush scaled up huge, then it's not that the brush is pointless, but it certainly limits its usefulness, right? Those kinds of limited brushes with those kinds of limitations, um, tend to end up not in my core rotation. They tend to end up in my, like island of misfit brushes folder, which you know that those have a purpose. They do. They just don't come out very often. That's a super interesting area there. Like, is this just a thing where like this whole stomach just gets blasted? Flavor blasted. Maybe. Now, something that's worth thinking about here is like, well, aren't these surfaces different? Like, some are more reflective than others. So, shouldn't we be having variability in this rim lighting? And yes, the answer is yes. These surfaces will react differently to the light, just as they do from the front light. But the light we're implying that's coming from the back is very, very strong. And so, even if one surface is a little bit more diffused than another one, a bright enough light is going to show up on both, right? So that's a little bit of the thinking there. Um, but yeah, it's you don't want to kind of go zombie mode on it, right? And just kind of forget thinking about those things. It will be most convincing with some variance. And here again, we can maybe play with colorizing that light. It's kind of fun to play around with this, right? Get some different colors going on. The blue light is pretty wild. I like that red light as well, that orange light as well. That might be a little strong. I think I like it being a tad warm though. The trouble with colorized light is that it is lower in value, right? The only way you can see the color is if the value is lower. And I like this light being very, very hot and very bright. We got to think about that. But yeah, maybe we'll leave that on. It's darkening it just slightly, but we're getting a bit of warmth in it, and that's looking kind of cool. So now we got to think about that light maybe coming in and hitting this guy as well. I'm kind of curious. yeah, how much this guy would be getting hit with the light. He's different. He feels situated differently enough in the scene to where we could justify the rim light maybe not catching him in the same way as our foreground character. If we felt like the rim light was just bringing too much focus onto this guy, then we could sort of say that, well, he's back in the distance and he's not quite getting the same uh he's not getting hit in the same way. So I think what I'm inclined to do here is pull back on some of the rim lighting in the rear and go for more of it here on this frontal section. Cool how dimensional that looks, right? Feels like you could reach into the screen. Actually, here, can I do this? Oh no, my camera. I have a mask on my camera. I was gonna like put my hand up and try to like grab the eyeball with my fingers, but I can't. Maybe we could push them down here. Yeah, there we go. Beep beep. Gotcha. Hey man, you got to have a little fun while you're doing this. All right, let's try that top eyeball. This guy up here, our cloud buddy. See what he's gonna look like with some rim light hitting him. Yeah, what brush am I using anyway? What did I go with? I think I went with texture charcoal or rock. One of those. I'll have to remember for next time. I think I'm liking that bit of crunchiness it's giving us. And one of the things that can help you get a little more comfortable with texture is just doing some traditional art, because you get all kinds of texture in traditional art just without you even trying, right? Like the pen and the paper texture and all of the your hand moving across the surface, all of those things are adding texture. And you kind of you get your eyes calibrated to what texture can do for a piece, whereas when you're in digital everything is so deliberate, right? Nothing happens by accident. You have to, if you want something, if you want happy accidents to occur, you have to have like a conscious effort to do that, right? To have that kind of process. And the same thing with textures, right? Like they don't appear for free. You've got to make the right brush choices, overlay things, or yeah, just in the way you're finding the forms or the way you're arriving at the design, you sort of allow there to be a looseness to that can give you some of that textural chaos. But again, like all of that sort of is deliberate choices. So yeah, here it's like, well, if we want this rim lighting to not feel like like it's making all the surfaces feel plastic, then can we maybe choose a brush that's a little bit more textured, and does that solve the problem? All right, I think we could go on to this guy in the front. I posted on Instagram earlier today just some of the doodles that I've been doing in my sketchbook. And I have this sketchbook that I've been using recently that's from Galen Leather. And it's not just a sketchbook, it's kind of just advertised as like a journal, but it's a blank journal, so it's perfect for a sketchbook. And I think the most interesting thing about it, I think I talked about this in the last stream. Yeah, the paper, right? I was talking about this Japanese paper, Tomoe River paper. And man, I just been having so much fun with it because it's so receptive to the inks. Like it just loves the ink. The ink doesn't bleed. It doesn't just get sort of sucked into the paper and become lifeless. It's kind of it sits on the paper just enough to allow the ink's properties to really show up, like if it has any kind of sheen or shimmer or whatever. It's super nice. So if you guys haven't looked at that and you're curious about just a kind of a new fun experience with drawing in a sketchbook, check out Tomoe River Paper and the Galen Leather journal that uses it is a pretty nice option. Hashtag not sponsored. All right, what am I doing here? What's going on? Am I bringing in a little bit of rim light over here? Maybe I am. Maybe this gets a little heavier up here on top. Yeah, so what's nice in particular about the rim light on this guy is that, we have this edge of him right against this space area, which is it has bright spots, but it also has very dark spots. And this continuous bright edge on this really helps this guy come forward. And since he is intended to feel uh, closer to us, right? He's sort of the closest thing to the camera, except for maybe the feather tail. Or maybe I imagine them being kind of similar in space in terms of depth from the camera. Uh, doesn't hurt to have this contrast helping this thing pop forward a bit. So I'm glad we have this opportunity. That might be a little far. Yeah, I'm going to keep it kind of over in that region. You can see that, yeah, it really pops that edge out. Love that. I love that for you. What's next, friends? What do we do? Do we hit some of the lower body with this rim lighting? Yeah. Maybe we explore a little bit down here. Kind of diffuse it out a little bit on the fur. Do we lose that edge though? If you think about the value there, I want to make sure that it's not getting lost. One thing that's a little unfortunate is this here. We get this dark edge against this space background here, and we kind of lose that arm, which I'm not a huge fan of that situation. Um, Maybe there's something we can put back here that's space-like that is brighter. But I also don't know that I want to draw your attention to this area either. So it's a little bit of a trickiness there. Something else that could be kind of fun. He is like a gremlin, I guess, of some kind. I mean, he's a monster, right? So maybe we give him a few more like weird little like freckly, mottledy bits on his skin. Just a kind of a random thought I just had. That could be kind of cool. Just pull from some of the colors that are already in here. Get this like kind of pinkish tone going on. Kind of pull in some dots. Create some interest. Give him some adorable little freckles. I mean, the if you wanted to follow human logic here, you would put these where the sun hits more, right? Like that's the idea of these sorts of little, um, sort of pigmentation anomalies. But he's a gremlin, so I think gremlins may just have some of these as part of their normal situation going on. Basically anywhere where I feel like we can have a little bit of extra information happening. Maybe that's too much down here. Yeah, I think I like it up there more. And time spent on the focal point of the image is going to elevate the whole piece. So I always try to put a lot of care into that section. And I like maybe spots being kind of higher up on his arm here. And then maybe they kind of fade away as they get lower. Maybe there's a few selective little dots on the hand. Man, the webbing and stretch on that area is kind of pushing the limits on that. That's maybe feels a little heavy, but again, they live in that sort of like creature the creature zone that is the zone of safeness in terms of pushing things a bit. Here again, you could use some kind of overlay texture, but yeah, painting dots I think is fairly easy to do. So we're just doing that manually. Maybe, yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like we just want to get a little more in here. Cool. So let's think about a little bit of bounce sliding going on. Think about if maybe we could get some areas where the shadows get a little bit warmer and brighter. So if I do this, that's probably going to murder my blending modes. You guys can't see I'm tinkering with some layer stuff here. Yep, don't want to do that. Okay, so if that's the case, maybe I take shadow layers, duplicate them all, merge them, and use them as the mask for this layer. Okay. And now, if I set this to, we'll go with hard light so we have some headroom on what we want to do here. I'm going to go like that zone. Ooh. Actually, wait, I think we want to go brighter. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. Okay. A little bit of setup, and I can start to push a little bit of kind of reflected light in some of these areas. And I think we can also apply a little bit of subsurface scattering while we're at it because we're on this sort of like a hot red layer. We did a little bit of that in the base flat coloring of the skin. But here I'm trying to hit it in a couple spots where I think the rim light would be bringing some of that in as well. Um, Really, what you're looking for here is you're looking for where there's like a reflector that's going to bring light back up and in. So, like if this cheek is getting a lot of rim lighting, then we could kind of justify bringing a little bit of bounce lighting back up and into that shadow area there. And that might be a little heavy, but kind of splash that in. Yeah, maybe the nose as a reflector can bring a little bit of light up into the brow area there. But it's on its own layer, so we can easily just turn it on and off to see, are we getting too crazy with it. Some fun stuff happening in there. How about over here? Yeah, maybe we get a little bit. Oh, this is going to be on a different. Oh no, that's fine. Yeah, cool. I just had to paint a little harder to notice the effect. Yeah, there we go. Yep. Good. Now you can also consider bounce lighting from the ground, of course. Now he's sort of hovering above the ground, and there's a good amount of distance there, so I don't know that we're going to get a lot of bounce light. But you could maybe just bring in a little bit, a subtle amount from below like this. You want to just kind of hint of a little bit of that kind of coming up from under. It's very subtle. If you look and I turn this layer on and off, you can basically see almost no value difference at all. It's just a little bit of warmth. If the floor was like a red color, I mean we would have to go further with it, right? But we're kind of implying that there's a warm light coming down, hitting the ground, and then bouncing back up. So it's just a little hint of warmth. You kind of have to just dial everything into the scene you're creating, right? Like assess what is that environment that this is in. And the other thing to address as well is the fact that the frontal lighting is dimmer now. We came in and we adjusted all the flats to be dimmer, and I feel like maybe the ground here is just too dark. Or sorry, it's not dark enough to represent that. Like the light doesn't feel like it's as intense now on him. So I want to pull back on this in the front here, and we can dial that on a layer. And then we've got this rim light coming in from behind. So now does that kind of justify, maybe a little bit of more lighting from the back there? And then, in terms of behind him, I want to be careful because I like the read of his dark cloak on this dark background. But we also have the rim light up on this side that can help this pop more if we darken the spot. So because we're in this sort of nebulous studio space, we have some freedom to dial in that value contrast to suit all the different areas of the character, within some limits, right? Like we can't break it so much that it doesn't make sense anymore, but we can do a little bit of micro tuning to help things read the way we would want. I want to play with on the coat. Would it be interesting to have like some gold trim on here? On the original, there's nothing like that. But we're trying to kind of elevate this, and I was sort of curious if maybe it just feels a little more high end if we give it this level of micro detail. So let's kind of pull back and see. And I think that there's something kind of nice about that. Kind of accents the coat shape there. And it's so small that, I'm not really having to be too finicky about exactly what this information looks like. It just has to feel sort of like fine filigree, and your eye, it kind of catches your eye a little bit enough to where you fill in the dots. So we're definitely kind of having a little bit of an impressionist's approach to this. But something that can be helpful to selling the effect is to have uh, some elements that get hit by the light more than others, because it is supposed to feel like gold. So if we go a little heavier across some of these bands, thinking about this shape that it's sitting on, right? It's sitting on a kind of half cylinder shape. So this is the apex of that form. So I'm thinking about how can we maybe create a ribbon like quality to that highlight if I pull it up a little bit here, and then maybe even on the opposite end, we maybe pull back a little bit here and here. So that stands proud. We pull back here, pull back a little bit here. It's in shadow. And that I think helps sell the effect there. And then if we like it, it's just a matter of thinking, well, do we do it elsewhere? Does it make sense to do it on the pocket, on the sleeves at all? I mean, here we have to do it because it's got to match the other side. So let's bring this in. It's not going to be super obvious on this side, but enough to where it feels like we've matched it up. I think it might be cool to just do a little hint on this pocket here. Go to the ambient shadow layer. And maybe let's play with a little bit of design work on this thing as well. I don't know what design it would be, but it doesn't really matter. It's just implying that there's some information on this. Feels a little bit more carefully considered. Maybe we just give this a little ring. A little extra ring area there. I mean, these are such small details that you start to wonder if it's gonna really matter or not. But I think it's a situation where you've got uh, small details that on their own aren't impactful, but collectively they do elevate the piece a bit. All right, let's save our work. If you're doing something creative, make sure you save your work. Man, we might be close to just merging this thing so we can just do our overpaint. Something that can be kind of interesting to do is to just dupe the rim light to just see how it feels if you just boost it more. I think that feels a little overblown. I think we dialed it in pretty good on our first pass, so that's good. I guess in the layered form, it would be better to get the space dimension in his hair finalized. So we've got some stars in place. Let's edit the stars a bit more. And I like this idea that maybe there's some that are just a bit louder and more obvious. So I'm gonna kind of lean into that here on a few. Maybe there's one down here. Okay, so I don't like it with so many little flary lines. I think just 4 is probably good enough. Maybe a little smaller one here. This is a situation where I probably should be painting zoomed out. Yeah, let's just do it zoomed out so I can see the balance I'm striking with this. And now with the mask applied, I'll pull back on some of these. Let's do round soft. And we'll go heavier with it. Ooh. What is this set to? Normal. Interesting. Because the base layer I see is lighter. Okay. There we go. So maybe the answer is where there are like medium-sized stars, we pull back on the medium stars and we let these bigger ones read and we allow the smaller ones to still exist. Or where there's more density, we kind of pull back on the density a bit. Let's go full opacity. I want to maybe make these brighter. So this in this case, we might just use a brush blending mode here. Pop these. We could also consider, it might start to not read as space though. Okay, I think I'm going to stick with that. I was thinking maybe there's like a colored glow around them, but that might start to read more like magic and less like space. Some of the stuff, it's like there's this a nuance to it and you can lose it so quickly. So uh, let's see if we can maybe bring in some other space like elements into this, like nebula type stuff. I've got collection of folders here, or rather photos. Let's see, reference, textures, and then we'll go to, I think I've got, yeah, space folder here. See if we can get a better view of these. So yeah, there's a few in here that could be fun to play with. Like, let's try some of these that are against a black background. Wow, I just duplicated them. Don't duplicate. Just select. Perfect. Perfect. And maybe this one. Okay, let's bring those in. The colors are kind of fun there. There's something kind of cool about that one. That's like got this sort of like a dimensional rip or tear thing going on. This one's fun, kind of more circular. Actually, this one's I like the pink element here, but I actually like this cluster of stars here as well. It's really cool. I'm sure some of you stargazing folks out there will be able to tell me, well, that's this constellation. I'm not any good at any of that stuff. I never was that into that. So apologies for my lack of recognition on this stuff. I just see it and I go, that looks sweet. Let's try it. So I'll set this to screen mode and then we'll adjust the levels. So that way we just only get the brightest parts showing. You can play with the scale and whatnot. We could even try and overlap that with some of the stuff we already had going, so it kind of like matches that. Could be interesting. Now, I'm a little concerned about having something so bright next to the face. I don't want to pull away from the face. And we did talk about maybe having some light areas here. to help this coat read, but I think that that may actually make it worse. If you look at what it's doing, it's making it more gray. So that might be, in fact, worse. Do I like it? Let's see. Guess I can just zoom out. We can kind of see. I know it might just be too loud. What if we rotate it? That's not too bad there. Let's try that, but let's scale it down. Let's go a little smaller with it. Yeah, okay. I don't mind that. I think that's got something interesting going on. So that was from this one. I think this might just be too loud. This crazy like purple thing, as cool as it is. I am curious about this though. So let's grab this area here. Now, for something where you wanted to have a more of a hand painted feel, you'd obviously, you know, maybe do not such a photographic element, right? Like you'd maybe look at it and then try to paint something reminiscent of that. But here, I don't mind that it feels more realistic. Boy, that's a super weird look, isn't it? That thing. It almost reads like a scar or something. A space scar. Um, let's mask this, and is that doing what I want it to do? I want to make this a seamless patch, so I want to kind of erase the edges away. Okay. That might just be too distracting, it's like it kind of calls your attention too loudly. Or you start to it starts to feel it's interesting how the way that it's shaded, it feels dimensional. Like it has volume, and I want the hair to have this intentionally flat look. Like it is volumeless because you're looking through into something else. So I think I'm going to maybe stay away from something that's that loud. But this is kind of interesting because this is like stars, but they're colored stars. And that might add some interest to the hair. Like as a little bit of like a gradient going on there that's kind of interesting. So what if we set this to screen mode and we play around with the levels on this guy? So what's kind of cool about this is that the gradient it creates, right? You almost can sort of create like a flow from the top here down to the bottom here, which I know I just talked about it feeling flat and like it doesn't have volume, but actually I like that position for it right there. It's pretty cool. I'm not sure I'm feeling that section though. Let's put a mask on it. Kill that. And then I think this base photo we're working with might feel a little bit blurry. I'm gonna apply a sharpen to it. Or actually, you know what might be better is if we just soften the other ones a little bit. I think that was more of the issue, was that the ones are just feeling a little too sharp in comparison. But if we pull them, if we make them all sharp, then they're going to actually feel sharper than the painting does. And I don't want there to be that mismatch. So, so I think that's got a pretty cool vibe to it. Yeah, the back end of this guy gets lost because we darkened this, and the back end is not getting hit with the rim light. So here I might want to and kind of abuse our studio background a bit and maybe pull a little bit more light into that area so we see that guy's shape a bit better against the background because we still read the rim light against everything. So I want to go a little lighter there. And then what happens if this gets darker over here? I want to see what that does. Does that just kind of pull your attention in better to? I mean, vignetting stuff like this is a classic approach, but I don't like to just immediately assume I should vignette everything, right? Like you really want to consider that carefully. So we lose the back end of this guy here, which I don't love. So maybe we'll pull back on that a little bit. I do want this tail to read. Let's see. Yeah, I think let's leave it there for now. And I want to address his shadow underneath. I do want it to be a fairly soft, diffuse shadow. But what we have is just such a vague idea of the character. I think it would be good if we took the shape of the character here and maybe started with that. Which, if I remember right, we had a layer here for him. So let's do that and let's pull it down. And we'll colorize. Get some warmth going on in it. And then we're going to blur that thing. Okay, and I'm going to warp it. And now I think, let's see, I think maybe our base background layer is what had that fake shadow in there. I think. Either way, we'll just kind of paint it out a little bit. And then let's sort of diminish the shadow back here. And that might just want to be a little flatter. I want to take the jewelry, which is a layer called what? What did we call that layer? Buttons? Yeah, I want to take the button saturation down just a bit. It's feeling a little heavy. Cool. think that might be everything worth addressing in the layered version of this character. I think we go to the merge version now. So when I do that, I just take everything and I don't get rid of the layers. I just stick them in a folder basically in case we need to go back to them later. So all of this is the background. We got a lot of stuff in the background, which honestly, yeah, I'll leave them as layer. I was saying I could probably simplify the background. You know, I'm just gonna merge the background. Yeah, we'll just merge it together. We don't need to make it complicated. Then this all goes into a folder. I'll just call it O1. And now we duplicate O1 and we merge O1 into a single layer. And now we've got our characters one layer. So now what's the first thing I like to do? I like to look at where we have any edges that need to be finessed. You know, like we got plenty of stuff in here that just, you know, just kind of felt like it was not so hot. So I'm going to kind of try and dither this a little bit, create a little more of a finessed edge here. I mean, it is still intended to feel like his hairline, so I think you can definitely try and indicate that a little bit better. And then the outer hairline here, I think could also, of course, be made a little bit more nuanced. I still have those layers, right? So if we need to bring the stars back in, if they get a little bit lost in this process here, not a big deal. I'm just trying to allow myself a bit more freedom to play with the complexity of this edge here. So you can see here how it's a merge version is very easy to play with our edges and do this stuff. And we could even go in and maybe we grab a cloud brush. And we've got so many to choose from, but maybe we find a good one. Opacity's 100%. Yeah, maybe. Sort of add a little bit of extra pizzazz to this. think I want to dither this shadow edge a little bit more here. It's feeling a little harsh for such a soft, round form. Yeah, there we go. Okay, other edges to play with. Just have to go kind of our meticulous pass here. Might be nice to add a little bit of white highlight to this tongue here. Just a couple little specular hits. Some of that wetness. And of course, we could emphasize any shadows that we think weren't quite getting across the finish line. You'll notice that there's a little bit of like edge blending issues right here in this area. So I'm going to try to just clean that up a bit. It's like a 2 pixel line, but it's definitely worth addressing. You got to be strategic because you could kill yourself getting in here and just making everything super perfect. And let's continue with the hair edge refinement. That was, I think, having a really good impact. Oop, don't get our little eyeball guy's tentacle there. You're also kind of looking for where the breakup feels strange. I guess we sort of there's a little bit of a weird tangent. Like I sort of like this the edge of his hair feels like it's being too careful about not overlapping our little eyeball guy, and I don't want that to feel that way. So I'm going to just kind of make sure it overlaps fully there. The other thing you can do too is you can use the stamp tool to just bring in some of the stars that we lost in the smudging, which works really well. So yeah, maybe we need a few more on the edge here. And we need a few more in this part. Whoops. Obviously, you don't want to move into an unsampled area or a different area of the image that you don't want to be replicating. Yeah, maybe we get a little bit more here. A few more stars there, and maybe here. Okay, I think his fur edge here on his legs could be a little more dithered. And now the feather here wants some softness as well. I mean, the idea here is that if we have some of these soft edges in the piece, then the crisp edges will feel crisper in comparison. I want to make sure that there's that contrast going on. Now, feathers are actually pretty sharp looking for the most part, so I don't want to go crazy with this here. Just trying to make sure it doesn't feel like a super digitally precise edge. I want it to have a little bit of hand painted sort of natural quality to it, a little bit of gesture. Yeah, even stuff that gets a little weird and stuff can be fine, like a lost edge that sort of just dithers into the distance, I think can be super cool and interesting. Um, Worth flipping our image just to see if there's anything we want to kind of like liquefy at this stage. Good stage to do some liquefaction if we're noticing some shapes feeling a little bit weird. Can also be a moment where we might notice some shadow edges that are feeling a little bit off. Maybe this area just doesn't want to get that heavy shadow as much. This is interesting. I wonder if I'm going to play around with this rim light hitting this back edge here a little bit more. Yeah, helps the edge of that head pop a bit more. All right, let's liquefy this guy a little bit. I feel like this wants to just be maybe a little bit out further, not that eyeball, just this shape here. And then I may want to adjust the hairline a little bit as well. Let's pull this in a little bit. I think it was just getting a little too aggressive there. Yep. This is a super unfortunate situation here. Like that hand gets totally lost in the background. And that might be something where we gotta pull back on the brightness there. Yeah. Yeah, that's better. That hand needs to read. I also feel like it's a little weird that this cloud guy kind of hits the edge right there, and I kind of want to bring everything down a little bit and then scale the background slightly up. So that way this guy just doesn't feel like he's hitting the edge there. I think it just kind of centers him better in the frame anyway. Probably put him more like that. Yeah, I think that just reads better. How are we doing on time? Okay, we got a few minutes left, so good. I always like there to be a little bit of extra time, right? So we can tinker a little bit, have some fun, try some weird stuff. We could try bringing in some full black shadows just to see how that looks. It's always an interesting thing to try. You never know. so that's full black there. We're already pretty close to it, but it can be an interesting thing to add in a few spots. That shadow edge there just feels a little harsh to me on that nose. I'm gonna pull that back a little bit. Let's see what Photoshop thinks our piece is under auto tone. Okay, so it wants to just pull up the brightness overall a little bit, which uh, that's a good sign. It means that we're just living in a little bit of a limited value range, but we're not super off on stuff. I think what I might do is pull the front value down a little bit, pull the intensity up a little bit there. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's a little bit richer. It's funny on my other screen, it looks higher contrast. It also looks a little more saturated on my other screen. I wonder if it wants to be. Probably, I'm just going to pull the saturation down just a couple clicks. I think it's feeling a little too saturated. Yeah, that's a little bit closer to what I would want. Another good note for you guys is look at your art on more than one screen. Hopefully, your main screen is pretty well calibrated. You can trust it, 90%, but just save it to your drive online and open it with your phone is a great one you can do. If you've got a second monitor, look at that as well. Um, okay, so I think the last thing we need to be addressing here, the big thing missing, is just the details on all of the little pupils on the eyeballs, right? So um, let's get in there and start messing with these. Yeah, it is your creature eyes, so I'm just kind of having some fun with kind of like weird details. Okay, let's see. This is like a pretty dark eyeball. So what I might do here is just give it a little bit of inverse shading. pull the lightness up a little bit on that side. Also sort of soften a little bit of these edges here just because it's like you want it to feel like it's sort of sunken into the eye, right? Or it's like underneath that lens of the eye, the cornea, right? Um Whereas if it's super sharp, it's going to feel like it's a sticker sitting on top, and we don't want that. Get a little bit of, again, inverse shading on this iris area. And maybe we'll pull this up a tad over here. And then let's do this. Pull that over the eye. His eyes are really weird, right? Like they're these little pinhole, like cross things. So I don't know that we'll have too much opportunity to do any kind of like lens like stuff going on there, but we'll try it. We'll play with it, see what happens. This is that W octopus eye that we had a viewer recommend to us. Very cool idea. A little bit of light hitting some of that there. Make that transition feel a little milkier. And then maybe we push, maybe push a little bit of the highlight over like that. And I'm going to smudge that one out. All right, same deal on this side. A bit of inverse lighting. Softening the edge. Maybe with this one, we'll do a little bit of like weird strands kind of pulling off of it. Yeah, that's cool looking. They've got this guy here. This is a fun one. Get some inverse lighting. Pop this highlight over. A little bit of light hitting this opposite edge. Milkier edge. It's a little bit of a oopsie on the edge of this eyeball on the cloud here. Let's fix that. Maybe we get, is there a little bit of shadow casting on this here? Maybe, yep. Okay, so this eyeball here is completely in shadow, except for it's getting hit with this rim lighting here. And so I sort of wonder if we can maybe do something clever, like you do a little bit of like inverse lighting, like this is sort of catching a little bit of the light through this angle. And maybe we have that reflection kind of come over the back side of the eye a bit. Yeah, that looks cool. Let's go with that. All right, now we got this guy. A little bit of darkness on this edge, a little bit of lightness over here. Bury it in the flesh. Is that do you call the eyeballs matter. Do you call it flesh? Is it eyeball flesh? Or I don't know why that sounds weird to me. Maybe we create a little bit of strands on this one as well. I guess we have these tiny guys, but man, they're so small that I feel like we just maybe just soften them a little bit. And we roll with that. I mean, again, if you zoom in on all this stuff, you know, you'll see there's tiny little issues that I think if I was gonna like have this printed or like this was gonna be some kind of client project that was gonna be blown up really big, these are things where we would want to have that sort of fine tooth comb approach to all the small stuff, but as it is here, we're sort of just addressing it at a reasonable viewing distance. All right, and then finally his eyeballs, which this actually I needed to get a little bit softened here. A little highlight, a little shadow, add a bit of dimension, bury it in the eyeball, flesh a little bit. I mean, these are definitely really odd, these eyeballs, but I kind of like them. I kind of like how weird they are. I hope you do too. I like to try to take a few risks with the design. We could experiment with the idea that this tail has a little bit of motion blur to it. Let's see, blur motion. Let's go. So just kind of blur it out a little bit there, kind of coming towards us. And then we can come in and we can do some selective sharpening. So wherever we want there to be a little bit of, let's see, are we on the right thing here? Sharpen, normal, strength 50. Let's go up to strength 80. Let's go to sharpen saturation. Why does this feel like this is not? Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay, yeah. I guess let's just go to 100% on that. I think I lost. I had a brush for this, and I think I might have lost it, but that's okay. I think we just remade it. So you kind of like where I want your eye to be feeling like there's a lot of information, where the focal point is. Certainly, I kind of try to bring up a little bit of this detail with the sharpen tool. And if everything's sharp, then nothing feels sharp, right? If everything's soft, nothing feels soft. So like here, I'm gonna take this thing and I want this to feel like it's coming towards you. So I'm gonna sharpen this, right? But I'm gonna let this stuff kind of dither. I'm gonna sharpen that little point right there. So it pops a bit more. Here we can maybe like sharpen the highlight on the eyeball a little bit. You're going to notice this if you see there's a lot of these like viral Instagram portrait artists who do like beautiful ladies' faces, and it's all so like just milky soft, right? But then like there's a highlight on the lip that is like looks like it could slice you open. It's so sharp, right? And then that contrast is what's really really pleasing. Your eyes just love to devour that kind of contrast. So um, this is just kind of playing with the same principles, really. Again, the lip highlight here, just really pop that. Play with a little bit of sharpness on that highlight there, but it's next to this soft, gooey part. And your eyes really like soak that up. Transitions in here, I think, could be maybe finessed if I wanted to kind of do another little pass on this. But finally, I want to liquefy this tail a little bit. There's a few kind of jaggies in here that I'm not a fan of. Just got a little kind of crooked in a few spots. Thickness got a little weird. And then I wanted to look at this hand as well. I felt like these just needed to all shift over just a little bit. Maybe pull this in a little bit. Yeah, something like that. And then yeah, gosh, this is the only thing where I'm like really, really bugged by the fact that you can't read this arm. And if we bring another light in, it's like, well, then we have to go in and maybe it's like it's just gonna look weird unless we really like render it everywhere. Like that's something that I think is generally no is to have like a weird faux edge on this stuff. I mean, maybe it's justified by virtue of like the stars, but then it's like, well, why isn't it happening anywhere else, right? Like I think that at some point you maybe break the immersion too much, but I wonder if there's a way for us to just hit it in a few very selective spots. So that way your eye at least doesn't lose this edge, right? Like, this is the classic lost edge idea is that you have waypoints and you're not connecting the waypoints together. But you're placing them often enough that the eye fills in the information, right? Like, see those little, I feel like those little hints, we're kind of getting away with it there. Like, we're kind of cheating, and I think we can probably make that work. It's subtle enough, and I think it just helps that arm from being lost in the image. So, that's the kind of fine tuning that's important to do. Like, leave yourself time at the end of an image so that you can address readability issues, right? Where you have counter change issues, tangents, yeah, all that stuff, right? Like, there should be a pass where you're addressing that because hopefully you have thought about that as you're doing the piece. But by the end, there's so many steps and there's so many things to think about that you might get there and think, well, yeah, I missed a few, and you want to make sure you can address those. So yeah, I think we're a little long on the stream tonight, but this was basically the finale for the Boogeyman, and I wanted to make sure we had some nice time here at the end to really get him looking nice, and I think he does. I hope you agree. I hope you had fun watching this character come together. Yeah, it was a super fun one, and I'm already thinking about who is the next Ghostbusters villain from the cartoon that we can redesign. I have a few ideas in mind. If you guys have some favorites, maybe leave them in the comments and I'll take a look. But otherwise, have an awesome rest of your day. And I hope I catch you on the next stream. And just a reminder that if you're interested in my free drawing guide, by subbing to the channel, you can download that. And I think you'll maybe have some fun taking a look at that as well. So, all right, guys, see you next time. Bye bye.